Hi everyone, this is Chris Watterson, and I'm going to take you through the basics of some color theory with an intent to help instructional designers use color in an appropriate way for their presentations and projects. So with that in mind, let's get started. So you may be familiar with the concept of primary colors, but did you realize that it actually depends on which medium you're working in? There are actually three primary categories. The first one you're probably familiar with is paint, and these are the ones that you've heard in school, the red, blue, and yellow. And we're taught in school that by mixing these three colors, you can create any color. And while that's true, it's true for paint. Interestingly enough, I just watched another YouTube video saying that the foundation was a bed of lies and that red, blue, and yellow were not the true primaries. I'm going to include that link in the course, but and you can decide for yourself. It's a little deep. It might be more information than you're ready for. So I can see where she's coming from, but again, it's not traditional, let's say that. So paint, of course, is red, blue, and yellow. And the next category is print. And this is cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. And these primaries, you may or may not be familiar with unless you've had to refill your printer ink, but these colors are responsible for everything that we see in print, such as magazines, flyers, posters, banners, even full color vinyl vehicle wraps. The last category is digital, and this is RGB. These colors make up everything we see on TV, our computer screen, and because if you actually get close enough, now it's getting more and more difficult because pixels are getting more and more smaller. I mean, think about retina displays, right? So the pixel actually has each color, red, green, and blue, within it. And by varying the amount and combinations of each color that the pixel produces, it creates the full blend of color for that small little pixel, and then together it makes the image. Knowing these primaries are important because as a designer, you have to determine the output of your project. If you're creating a printed document, you'll want to make sure that you're using images built in CMYK. And if you're creating a PowerPoint, you'll want to have RGB images. And it's really only important if you're working on this type of a thing for professional purposes because sometimes certain colors don't translate well between the mediums. For example, CMYK blue looks like periwinkle in digital images, but it prints just fine. And RGB blue looks great on your screen, but it can skew purple when it's printed. So it's not always an issue. But just if you are trying, if you're just doing a digital presentation, you might not have any problems. But if you end up, having difficulties across mediums, then consult a professional, and I'm sure they can help you out. Color opposites are the ones that are directly across from each other on the color wheel. So just like black and white are opposite, there are also contrasting colors like red and green are opposites, blue and orange, or yellow and purple. So this is kind of a fun experiment to talk about opposites. These are colored according to the opposite color. So as you stare at these images for a few seconds, it's going to get burned into the back of your retina as a negative. And then if you quickly look to a blank wall or a white piece of paper, you'll see the correct color as an after image. So go ahead, I'll give you a few seconds. Stare at the center of one of these images for 10 seconds and then look at a blank wall. I'll count you down. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, now look at a blank wall or a piece of paper. Did you see it? So good contrast for your messages is really important. Text should be easy to read and understand, and images should not make you go crazy. There is such thing as push and pull effect. Now, if you put two opposites next to each other, like for example, this image is blue and orange, those are opposites. I'm going to say this wrong. Chromostereopsis. It's a big word, but it means the vibration that happens to your eyes when you look at contrasting colors. They have a push and pull effect, which causes your eyes to actually vibrate. And it's not something we want in our presentations. So here's a quick quiz. Answer for yourself whether you think these are good or bad contrast. Now, the reason I put this quiz together is actually because I came across a website that had this red and green box on their page. And I think they were trying to make it noticeable, but honestly, it just made it ridiculous. And so I had to put this slide together because I don't know who told them that that was okay. So now we're going to take three of our examples, and I'm going to use the coolers.co contrast checker. So this bottom one down here with the white and the pink, you might see a lot of these, like my niece calls it aesthetic, but these trending images that kind of have low contrast. And while it might look cool and trendy, it's really not great for readability. And especially when you consider 508 compliance or accessibility needs, not everyone in your audience may be able to read that. So no, that is not good contrast. Let's look at this one, the green and red. I mean, this is creating that chromostereopsis problem that we spoke about earlier. It is not something you want to have in your presentation. And let's look at this last one on top here. It actually has a pretty good score. It has good contrast. It's probably not as good as it could be, but it's better than the other two examples. So we're going to explore some color harmonies. Now, these 6 terms are definitely more advanced. If you don't come from an art background, you might not have heard these before, but monochromatic, analogous, complementary, split complementary, triadic, and tetradic. Now, these are color harmonies that have been around forever. Like I said, traditional art background, you are probably familiar with these, but it can be overwhelming for people that don't come from that experience. So fortunately, there are modern tools to help us and help IDs who don't have an art background like me come up with color palettes for their projects. Coolers.co has a great color palette picker just to help you find a palette for your project. And if you go there, like this one says trending, it changes all the time. So this is the one that I pulled at the time that I made this presentation, but they may have different ones if you go there today. Adobe has a fantastic color wheel online application here where you can choose, you know, if you wanted to choose monochromatic, analogous, a triad, complementary, all those different things, you can click a button and it will automatically generate a color wheel for you. The other cool thing is that you can upload a photo and it will pick the color palette from that photo. So here's an example of that. And then there's also, as you can see, click a button on the side there and you can choose like a different option. So coolers.co, you can create palettes. It will generate a palette. It has hex code color pickers for web application. You can also take photos and create a palette out of those. Adobe at color.adobe.com creates palettes, explores existing palettes. They have trending inspiration. You can extract a color palette or a gradient from an image. And they also do have a blind or colorblind safe checker and a game, which the game is okay. But the colorblind safe checker is helpful if you know for a fact there is some color blindness in your audience, or you wanted to see what your image would look like if someone was colorblind and looking at it. So palette generators, this is just a look really quick at the Collage Maker on coolers.co. I'm not really sure how it picked the brown. Actually, let me go back here really quick because it was looking at this image and said there was a brown in it. And I'm like, maybe, but to me, I didn't think it did that great of a job. This is the one that Adobe picked from this same image, which I feel is a little bit better. So here are some design tips when you're creating your presentations. It's always helpful to plan ahead, and if you can, create a style guide at the onset and ensure that consistent colors are used throughout. Having that style guide in the beginning kind of sets a framework for how you're going to treat images and colors and perhaps even fonts throughout your presentation. And that, like I said, gives you consistency throughout as long as you stick to that guide and you're making sure that all of your fonts are the same, or that you're choosing one font or one color that you're using throughout. It also creates a very cohesive and professional look, and it feels good when everything belongs. If you ensure that you have good contrast and readability, you want to make sure that the main body of your content or your text has good contrast, because grayed text, I see it very often. It's really trendy, but it's too muted and it's kind of hard to read for a long time. So that second line there is an example of that. Just because it looks pretty doesn't make it functional. So it's always good to do a quick accessibility check to make sure that you have good readability and that everyone is able to enjoy your product. You also want to avoid making anyone's eyes vibrate. A great example of using a big picture. And now this picture was included with this slide theme that I got from Slides Carnival. And I loved that they chose a picture that matched the color theme of the rest of the project. So here are some resources you can go to, and I'll include the links within the course as well, so you can just click them and go to these. But color.adobe.com, coolers.co, Slides Carnival, which is where I got this slide theme. And then also thinkoutsidetheslide.com/choosing colors for your presentation slides. It's a great resource and is helpful on the topic of presentation specifically. Thanks again for joining me today, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.